I think it's recording.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Does it tell you that it's recording?
It does say it's recording, and I had to accept that it's recording.
Okay, cool. I want to see. I'm assuming it's showing both of us on the recording. That's like what I'm trying to do.
Oh yeah, that's my screen.
Cool. Okay, cool. So I put all of your food from the 24-hour recall into a database online, and I got some results of some strengths and weaknesses that I want to go over with you. So are you ready to hear that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, awesome. So I have them listed here. I'll read them off to you. Some strengths that I saw were you were very close to your calorie target given your like general height and weight and age. So that was great. Like the amount of energy that you were intaking was very close to the like ideal amount. And then you were also within your protein and your carbohydrate range. So you got enough protein, you got enough carbohydrate, but not too much. So that was great. And then you also achieved your vegetable and fruit intake, which can be a challenge for people, especially with vegetables, because I think a lot of people think that they eat enough vegetables, but then it's actually like not as much. So that was really impressive. And then lots of fiber too. Most Americans don't eat enough fiber, and you ate enough fiber, which is a huge plus. So lots of things going well, sufficient amounts of most vitamins and minerals. I'll get into some that could be increased. So some of them that could be increased are your vitamin D intake. You consumed about 94 units worth of vitamin D, and the target is 600. And then, yeah, and that's just based off of the multivitamin that you told me you were taking. And then folate, you could actually increase. It says you consumed 282 micrograms, and the goal for you would be 400. So a bit closer, but still could get a little higher. And then vitamin K intake, I have that you consumed 70 micrograms, the target's 90. So pretty close with vitamin K. Vitamins K is a bit tough to get in the diet unless you're eating a lot of like leafy greens and stuff, like large quantities. And then calcium. So you consumed 720 milligrams of calcium, but the target is 1200. And then the only thing I would say to reduce vitamin and mineral wise is sodium. But that just, you know, I saw that you did have that like shrimp fried rice, which probably was the source of like a lot of sodium. So it's probably varying day to day, but just so you know, the daily limit recommended is 2,300 micrograms or milligrams, sorry. So 2,300 milligrams, and that day was 3,529. So yeah, but you know, lots of water intake. So that was good. That helps flush out the sodium. And then if you could increase your grain and dairy intake, that would be beneficial. And the dairy would actually help you meet those calcium and vitamin D deficiencies if you do want to, you know, do that. So that's what I have written down. The only other issue that I saw was the saturated fat intake. You're a little bit over, but again, I'm sure it's dependent every single day. This is just one 24-hour spotlight. But that's what I got from that, just because, you know, based off of that day, that is what I saw. So with that, I want to hear from you. Is there anything that I said that jumped out at you as surprising or not surprising, or something that you want to work on?
Yeah, folate. I never really considered that. D, I know how important that is. So, but I feel like D is pretty easy because I can supplement my multi with like some D. Folate. So what would you recommend for that? Like an additional supplement?
Yeah.
Or is it more sanitary?
Folate, there's different forms of folate, and it's actually the supplement form of folate is more bioavailable, which is interesting because typically whole foods like fruits and vegetables are where we encourage people to get their vitamins and minerals from, because they typically are more bioavailable, and it's like, you know, food is good for you. But with folate, that's why, you know, a lot of, you know, as you know, with pregnancy, that's we're focused on in pregnancy, but I think people kind of forget about it if they're not pregnant or trying to be
Absolutely.
pregnant. So folate is something that I would recommend supplementing. You are pretty close. It's not like you have like zero folate. I think it was 282 that you were consuming, and the target's 400. So you probably don't need like too much of a supplement, but you could look into that and see what the dosages are for those.
Yeah, and of course, calcium, being that I'm in my mid 50s and I am menopausal. So I know that it's even something more important that I've heard that I need to watch.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned dairy. So I tend to not consume dairy. I do oat milk. Um, I don't drink cow milk. I do eat cheese, but in moderation due to the fat
Yeah.
and the calories. And I'm trying to think of what else has calcium. So I really can understand I don't have enough calcium.
Mhm.
So again, that would obviously, since I'm quite low, that would be a supplement as well.
Yeah, and with dairy, I get it's kind of a tough thing to balance because of the fat content in a lot of dairy products. But the only other thing I could recommend is maybe like a Greek yogurt or something.
Hmm.
They're really high in protein too. And so that's always good to get protein in. They've got that calcium from the dairy, but it's not in a super high fat form.
Right. That's a great idea because I do enjoy it. I don't eat yogurt, but I do like it, like with granola or something like that. Just
Yeah.
looking for a very low sugar or
Mhm.
unsweetened,
Yes, exactly. And
like a plain non-fat.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That
That's
would, yeah, that would be a good idea. And then any sort of green leafy vegetables like kale or okra have like lots of calcium, but spinach actually doesn't, which is interesting. It contains calcium, but the body usually doesn't absorb all of it for whatever reason. So kale is a huge source of calcium that is not dairy related. Um, and then anything that's fortified, like fortified cereals, fortified flour in bread. And then sometimes tofu is fortified as well, like soy milks or soy products are fortified, but I do know that you try to avoid soy as well. So there's a lot of other sources. Beans actually have some calcium in them, not as concentrated as dairy, but they do. So those are some things that you could maybe implement that.
great. Yeah, I
Oh,
enjoy kale. Okay.
yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Um, and sodium for sure. And I think that's quite common because
Mhm.
that 24-hour period um, is quite typical as far as a packaged Trader Joe type freezer item
Mhm.
for the evening meal.
Mhm.
And I know that they do tend to be high in sodium.
Yeah.
So I will watch that
Yeah.
more.
And, I know that you do cook a lot, which is great because going out to eat, there's typically higher amounts of sodium and sugar in those foods because we're not preparing them. But I did see that you know, and I know that you cook a lot at home. So that's great because you're obviously controlling like what you're eating, but it is those packaged things that'll get you. So
Yep.
in moderation, for sure. Or maybe just you can still have those things, but maybe just in smaller quantities or less frequently or whatever.
I think that would be the answer is probably maybe twice a week. It's more of a go-to now that we're empty nesting
Mhm.
and it's just so simple and there's less waste. But
Mhm.
yeah, by cooking, the herbs are, I don't use salt and I don't use herbs. I use herbs that don't have the salt in them.
Yeah.
So then we can salt on our own and be more in control of that. So that's definitely something that I should look into is just cutting back on those and cooking enough for two nights.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
instead of opening the freezer. Great.
Was there anything else that you wrote down that you wanted to look over?
No,
Okay.
that I can think of. I'd like to increase exercise, but that's
Guys. Yeah.
so. As
Okay.
far as my diet with that, I do see that I need to. I'm thinking of maybe a protein shake or something that's quick and simple
Mhm.
for that um, energy
Yeah.
to get on the bike, which I own, and to do things that I might not have the energy if I'm eating a little bit here and there. But
Mhm. Yeah.
so,
That is something that I saw with the timing. I was actually very impressed by. The timing of the things that you ate during that day was pretty consistent. There was a pretty wide gap between breakfast and lunch.
mhm.
But it, given the like foods that you were eating and like busy day and everything, that was good. So trying to aim for that every like 4 to 5 hours. Even, if you're worried about like, oh, but I don't feel hungry, but it's been 5 hours, you should still probably eat, which is kind of tough to get your body back into. But if you're not used to, or like if your hunger cues have changed or you're not as in touch with them as you might have once been or whatever, that can be difficult because your body's like, I don't want to eat, but it needs the nutrition. So
Right, stoke that fire, yeah, or grab a banana or something,
Mhm.
a handful of nuts, something to keep things going. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
great. They're all good ideas. So every 4 hours.
Awesome. Is there a specific one out of all that we talked
Mm.
about that you want to set a goal for? Or how are you feeling, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to change, with 1 being like not ready to change at all and 10 being super duper duper ready?
I'd say a strong 8,
A strong 8.
especially, yeah,
Okay.
especially with the supplements because it's very helpful. And I think that that was, like I said, pretty representative of what I tend to eat.
Mhm.
So where the big things are as far as the calcium and the D,
Mhm.
um, and then reducing the sodium. So those are the 3.
A
And
3.
I think I have a good plan of action for that because between the D, folate, yes, but the D and the calcium, all research a really good bioavailable vitamin.
Yeah.
And then for the sodium, um, I'm going to do what was suggested and watch the prepackaged um, dinners and just
Mhm.
stretch them out a little bit.
Yeah.
So duplicate the meal, make a larger whatever I'm preparing,
Mhm.
and then perhaps have a prepared dinner and then eat the leftovers from the other one or something like that.
Yeah, that
Of
totally.
course,
Sorry, go ahead.
that works, but also to I'm very ready to start exercising more. So
Mhm. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I know you mentioned the vitamin D. I don't know if I gave you any food sources of that. I think you would benefit from a supplement just because it was so low from where you should
right.
be, but just so you know, do you want to know some food sources of vitamin
Sure.
D? Yeah. Okay, so oily fish is a big one. Fish, I know it's tough because there is high mercury content in some of the fish that have high vitamin D content. So 2 that are lower in mercury and still high in vitamin D are salmon and sardines. So salmon would be, I think, a great addition to your
Mhm.
diet to circulate maybe once a week or so, because it is quite low in mercury, and has so many benefits with that vitamin D. And then red meat is actually pretty high in vitamin D. I know you don't eat a lot of red meat, but if you get, leaner red meat, then that would still be beneficial. And then egg yolks. So eggs kind of get some, I don't know, some bad rap stuff because of their cholesterol levels, but they do have a lot of benefits, again, if eaten in moderation. So those yolks of the egg do have some good vitamin D.
Great.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we've got vitamin D, calcium, and then there was one other thing you wanted to increase.
I wanted to reduce my sodium.
Use sodium, yes. Okay.
And then exercise.
Exercise.
Which
awesome.
is a little extra there.
Yeah, for sure. So we have this technique called making a SMART goal. Have you heard of SMART goals before? Yeah.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. So SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time constraint. So that's kind of how we shape a goal that is usually effective. There's a lot of actually like studies and research on SMART goals, and they're more specific than a general goal. So an example of a general goal related to what we've been talking about is like increase calcium intake. That's a general goal, but it doesn't tell you the details of how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, exactly how long it's going to take for you to increase them, etc. So we could take, one of those supplements or one of those minerals or vitamins that you are interested in modifying, whether that's the reduction of the sodium or the increase of the vitamin D or the calcium. And we can go into exactly how you would like to attain that goal, and maybe set a goal of like time related to that. So whether that's a couple weeks or months, like when you want to see your levels consistently at the level that they should be. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So we choose one?
Yeah, let's choose one. And then if you want to later on, we can go into more specifics about each one. But we'll start with like your number one goal right now.
Okay. I'm gonna choose the reducing of the sodium.
Okay, awesome. So reducing the sodium is our specific. So I'm going to actually take some notes on this. So reduction in sodium. Okay, so specifically, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at sodium. Now with the measurable, so the M in SMART, there's some numbers here. So that's what's actually nice about these goals, is we can measure exactly how much you're currently at, how much certain things have at the end of your day. There are tools on the internet to do that, which is nice, to calculate exactly how much of a certain vitamin or mineral you have. And so, yeah, so your current one, and I can send this to you after, but your current level from that day was 3,529 milligrams. And the supposed limit is 2,300. So we would probably want to reduce by like roughly 1,000 milligrams a day, just to start out, because even 1,000 milligram reduction would be really beneficial, I think. Yeah. And it sounds like a lot, but it's also in milligrams. So it's just kind of like a little daunting, but I would recommend looking at some food labels on like those prepackaged things to see how much sodium is actually in a serving. You might be really surprised. So with that, what's like a good amount of sodium that you want to reduce?
I think that it would be wonderful to do 1,000.
1,000?
For math's sake. That'll get me kind of in that range of recommended 2,300.
Okay, so I'm going to type down reduce sodium by 1,000 milligrams each day. Daily values. Cool. So that's a very great specific measurement of that. And then the A in SMART is attainable. So how exactly do you want to attain this goal?
I think that's one of the reasons I chose it. One, I think it's one it's skewed the most out of, what we went through. That's not with the supplements. but I feel like it's attainable because the packaging. I kind of feel like my sodium, I understand like other roughly, but to be more aware of the sodium throughout the day, but
Mhm.
specifically hone in on prepackaged foods,
Yes.
perhaps any jarred sauces,
Mm,
um, because it's simple because those things have the nutrition on it. So I can see, oh, this isn't necessarily a good product and choose a different one,
yeah.
go for the lower sodium.
Mhm.
And then using other herbs and no sodium things in my cupboard, I could doctor it up where necessary.
That's true.
Because that's kind of why I don't buy low sodium marinara, low sodium. Actually, I do buy low sodium soup, but anyway, I tend to go with the normals because I want it to taste good. But
Yeah,
now I know how easy it is to just take that gamble, get the low sodium, and then having that control back in the kitchen where it
yes,
should be.
that's true. Yeah, and that's great that
So I
you're
think it's attainable.
sorry, go ahead.
I think it's attainable because of the package situation. I think that's the biggest skew of my sodium intake since I don't eat, snack foods per se.
Mhm.
I think it's that frozen, pre-prepared foods. And so I'll just look at those and make different choices.
For sure, for sure. Choose package. Excellent. Yeah, I think it's great that you're already doing those low sodium soup options because it does allow for a lot. Because a lot of the times we associate saltiness with flavor
Yeah.
because it is a nice flavor, but there are other ways to achieve flavor in foods. And
Right.
salting things on your own will very likely be less salt than if you just, like you mentioned, getting the already normal sodium leveled foods. It's kind of, you can't take it out, but you can always add more if
Exactly.
the sodium option isn't really meeting what you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, great. So we have reducing sodium by 1,000 milligrams each day by looking at the nutrition labels on prepackaged foods. And if they're, super high, then you can go ahead and find a different option. And okay, that's awesome. So we have the S, the M, and the A of SMART. Now we're going on to the R, which stands for realistic. And that, when I go over SMART goals with people, I usually like to use the R as like, what are some challenges or obstacles that you might face so that you can prepare for those? What are some things that you think would be challenging about meeting this goal?
Maybe what I already have on hand, but I don't think that's a big thing because I don't have a whole lot on hand of that type of stuff. And realistically, I could certainly have a smaller portion if it is something like a sauce that's high sodium, to use less of it and then obviously not purchase it again, because
Mhm.
going forward, our next thing, I'm not trying to skip ahead, but for the time constraint, I think it could be immediately implemented, as in like tomorrow when I go to the store. But
Yeah,
from what I have, there are things that I don't have to wait for the new products. I can be kind of proactive and just limit the amount or don't eat it. It's like, yeah.
that's true. Yeah. I like that because you don't want to waste the food that you already have. Obviously, you want to eat it. So something you could do, I know we've talked about this with broths, like mixing the low sodium broth with the normal vegetable broth. If
Yeah.
you don't want, because they're two kind of extremes. So you could do
Mhm.
that if you perhaps have a pasta sauce that is in the pantry that's high in sodium, but you don't want to just throw it out. Find maybe uh, if it's a marinara sauce, maybe just find like crushed tomatoes or something that's
Mhm.
a sodium less sauce or a lower sodium sauce and kind of do a half and half situation. because that way you're still getting the amount of food that you want, but the sodium is halved. Does that kind of like
Right.
sense? I feel like that makes sense in my brain. I wanted to make sure it came out.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And then in that situation with just, your dad and I could put a ton more vegetables in that and freeze half,
Yeah. That's
right, for another week.
yeah.
And like I'm thinking ahead of the things I do have that are pre-prepared, and a lot of them tend to be like mushroom ravioli or something like that in the freezer. Those
Mhm.
are probably very high in sodium. But when we do a packaged like a mushroom ravioli, I always have a very large salad. So in that kind of situation, instead of having, 6 to 8 raviolis or whatever, I can have 3
Mhm.
or 4 and I wouldn't miss it and
Yeah.
eat a lot more salad. It's like just making modifications. And
Yes.
that's better for me as far as carbs and stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, you were in your carbohydrate range, so you weren't over in carbs. So just to keep that in mind, because a lot of people focus on carbs as the enemy, unfortunately. I know we've talked about this, but um, you know, they're not the enemy. I think a lot of people they're just associated with that. But just so you know, that typical day you did meet your carbohydrate amounts and you were in that range, because with the macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, they don't really have like limits necessarily. They have ranges like mins and maxes. And if you're in that range, that's like a good target essentially. Whereas the vitamins and minerals are like a number. And it's like you can still be a little bit higher or lower than that number. But there are certain things like sodium, like, the closer you can get to that number, the better it is. Whereas with the carbohydrates, you're definitely in that range. So
okay.
yeah, and the carbohydrates, a lot of them were from vegetables, and that might be why you also met your vegetable goal for the day. So it's like everything overlaps, which is why it's nice to do things in moderation and not cut things out, because if you cut something out, you don't know what else you're going to be missing. Yeah, so it's hard to think about. So like, for example, in these foods that are high in sodium, it's important to think, okay, what else are in these foods? If it's a prepackaged fried rice, like the one from the recall, and it had, the shrimp in it and some vegetables in it. And, those contain important macro and micronutrients.
Right.
And so if you're reducing that, consider that with the other foods in that meal. Make sure that you're not going too low on the protein because you're losing out on some shrimp, or too low on your vegetables because you are reducing them in the fried rice packet. So just keeping that in mind when you're making these
Right.
changes. It's tough to balance for sure, but it sounds like this is doable. And I think we can set like a time goal for that. I know you said you can start it as early as tomorrow when you go grocery shopping, but with when you want, because there's not really an end goal for this, because it's just kind of like okay, every day I'm going to aim for that, 2,300 or the less or 1,000 less than normal. Is there a certain time that you have in your mind that you would want to be doing that consistently, or like it's kind of a habit for you at that point, like second nature?
Right. I would say like maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, I don't know that it would take that much longer than that.
Yeah, because different people say different things with making habits. Some people say 28 days, some people say 46. It's like depends who you ask and what kind of behavior change it is. But I think, if you do something consistently for 4 weeks, and you feel like it's sustainable at the end of those 4 weeks, you're like, yeah, I could keep doing this, then that's a good sign that it might just become a new habit, that you just like brushing your teeth in the morning, or like anything that you already do, it's second nature to do it because it is a habit that you've already formed. So that's kind of the goal with this behavior change, is to eventually make it something that's second nature. And that, when you're at the grocery store, you don't have to be like, oh, wait, I have to like double check things. Like you already are going toward those lower sodium options.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna write down every day for 4 weeks, and then kind of do like an internal check-in at 4 weeks. See, is this sustainable? Am I still enjoying my food? Like all of those important things, because you know, nutrition is important, but it's also important to think about, does it fit in your lifestyle? Does it make you happy? Is it taking anything away from the pleasure of eating food? All that sort of stuff, which again, I know you know, but yes.
Yeah, that sounds good, because I think just knowing it, just being aware of it, and that awareness, it will be, like you said, like second nature. It'll be innate. So it'll just be the new normal, where it's that being cognizant of it. Because I really hadn't before this. I didn't really concern myself with sodium.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough, but now you know, like I'm glad we did this, and I
So am
think
I.
it sounds like this goal is very doable for you. It sounds like you have a good attitude about it. Um, how do you feel about
I
what the
feel good about it. Very good. Yeah.
good, cool, still a solid 8 on that 1 to 10?
Oh yeah. And I think it would be very beneficial for the other household members. And I know that when you're over 50, then you might need to be a little more concerned with perhaps blood pressure,
Mhm.
heart health, et cetera, the things that, just a little bit high sodium level, um, yeah, it could
Yeah,
make a big difference, I think, by actively working to get it down and being
yeah.
aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is like somewhat unrelated, but just something I wanted to mention too, with the sodium and hypertension and your cardiovascular system. I am learning about that in one of my classes, and I thought of you when I heard about it because like men are sometimes at a higher risk for things like heart failure or ischemic heart disease or hypertension, and then anyone who's 65 or older. And that's because it goes from like mostly men, and then women are like thrown in there as well as a high risk people when they're typically over 50, or they usually say 65, but that's
Mhm.
very general because it is based on menopause, and it's because the estrogen levels when you're not menopausal actually protect you from a lot of those things. And hypertension is what I thought of when I saw the sodium, because higher sodium puts you at a higher risk for hypertension. So if you have that plus, changes in hormones, those changes in hormones are also putting you at a higher risk of hypertension. So
Wow.
um,
So I chose the right one.
you did, yeah. It's great to be looking at that right now because it's like if there's ever
I never even considered it.
yeah, if there's ever a time to reduce your sodium, it's
It's
now,
now. Yeah.
because those estrogen levels they used to be like a shield, and now they're kind of
Now
fading
they're
away.
not.
Yeah,
Right.
so um yeah,
Yeah. And
that's good.
I feel like that was something too, with the calcium, but I really liked the idea that was given regarding the yogurt, because that's available in all these different types of dairies, right? Like you don't have to have, they make yogurt. I don't know if they make it with oat milk, but I know they do with almond milk, don't they?
Yeah, there are different like plant-based yogurts for sure.
Mhm.
Just double check, because a lot of dairy alternatives are fortified with the vitamins and minerals that are in dairy so that people don't have those deficiencies. Soy
Yeah.
is very frequently fortified, but I know you don't really
Yeah.
want to do that. So check the like labels when you look at yogurts or you look at milks, and just see if it's fortified. It's usually listed at the end of like the ingredients list. It'll throw in like vitamin A and D and C and calcium and stuff like that. And you can also look just at the nutrition label itself and see the percentages of those vitamins and minerals, and
Mhm.
just kind of see if it's even present. And sometimes on the actual packaging, it will say like fortified with blah, blah, blah. And
Yes.
so, yeah, fortified is the word that you're going to be looking for, because it's essentially, just putting in like as if you were supplementing it with a supplement, but the supplement's in the food.
Food,
Um,
right.
so that would be helpful as well.
Okay. And I may just go with non-fat plain yogurt
Mhm.
because it's so versatile.
It is.
'Cause you can do it savory, you could do it sweet, you can sweeten it with fruit, you
Mhm.
can make it with dill and a bunch of herbs on a potato. I mean, I really and I don't know why I don't eat yogurt, so that's gonna be good.
Yeah. Yeah, and,
Okay.
yeah, low-fat Greek yogurt, I think would be a great option for you.
Do you
Because
recommend non-fat or low fat?
you can
Either?
try both. You can try both and see how you like them. And you can weigh to see if, one tastes better than the other, if one's more satisfying than the other, because that's why people usually actually recommend not doing too many non-fat foods, like non-fat ice cream, because people don't feel satisfied after eating it. So they actually eat
Yeah.
more ice cream.
Or yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, yes, you're not eating as much fat, maybe, but you're still having all the sugar and all that kind of stuff. So seeing, if the low fat is a lot more satisfying and you feel satiated afterwards than the non-fat, it's like probably 2% fat. So it's really not a huge difference nutrition wise, but if it's a huge difference taste wise, then I would go with the low fat.
I'm thinking of a lot of ways I could use it. And
Mm.
that was one of the reasons looking back on it that it was the sugar that made me stop eating yogurt a long time ago. So if I get a low fat plain, then I'll have other options. Like I said,
Mhm.
use it with both ways, sweet or savory. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can always sweeten it like with honey or fruit.
Fruit.
Yeah,
Yeah. Berries,
if you're wanting it
cinnamon. Yeah.
cinnamon. Yeah. And I love the idea with the dill. You could do like
Mhm.
celery and carrots in the dill dip, like a
And
ranch.
onion, all kinds of stuff. Right. Just make like this really delicious something for like a baked potato or something. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Cool. Okay. I'm looking over my notes and I think that's a solid goal. I'll just reiterate it one more time as a little summary. We've got our reduction in sodium, trying to reduce it by 1,000 milligrams each day. That is attainable because the packages have nutrition information on them. So you can look at it and then make different choices if the nutrition label is telling you it's very high in sodium. And then it's realistic because or there's some challenges because you already have high sodium foods on hand, but you can just reduce the portions of those foods. You could also combine the high sodium foods with low sodium foods to reduce your overall amount of sodium without reducing the amount of food that you're eating, because it is important to maintain, that caloric level that you're at because you are in your calorie target. Um, and then yeah, just trying to do that every day for 4 weeks and then doing a little check-in after 4 weeks, which we can do. It won't be part of the project, but I'm curious. We can
Yeah.
look into it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Any other questions you had?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
of course.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.